Let's get started. Good morning and good evening to the audience and our speakers for the 15th Transatlantic AI Exchange web session. Today, September 13th, 2022. I'm Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, a longtime entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley for over 31 years now, and now working at Intel's headquarters in Santa Clara around topics related to the artificial intelligence and the data center of the future. We are again super excited bringing together high-tech experts and connecting them with the up-and-coming German and European startup and AI ecosystem. Allow me to provide a quick overview of this Transatlantic AI Exchange initiative. We're calling it TAIX. TAIX is a platform that aims at accelerating and expanding the transatlantic knowledge exchange in the human-to-machine economy, what we call the so-called fourth industrial revolution. We foster exchanges on AI and create the grounds for entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, corporations, the German Mittelstand, which is also called SMBs, and policymakers to build long-term partnerships. Within less than a year, we have been building an incredible network of experienced people, creating 14 virtual sessions to share useful and valuable knowledge to over 2,100 attendees. We also hosted the first virtual EU AI conference on March 22nd, which alone had over 1,100 attendees from a record-breaking 84 different countries. Let me share a slide for a second, if I may. Here we go. I hope everybody can see the slide. So first of all, on behalf of the entire TAIX community, I want to thank our growing list of partners who are actively participating and promoting this unique program to their network locally and abroad. All our sessions are recorded and available to watch for free. Videos are actually AI enabled to search for words and video clips powered by the platform called Clipper. So please have a look at all the videos that we have recorded so far. Now, for the startups and for the entrepreneurs, we are excited to also announce our 2022 awards program to support entrepreneurs in their journey. Any person who attended at least 2 of our 2022 TAIX events and they are sharing our events and following us on LinkedIn can win up to $1,000 towards travel expenses and up to 6 hours of coaching and mentoring from TAIX experts. If you believe our event is of value to you and your network, we greatly appreciate if you can share and like us on our LinkedIn page. Yvonne is now posting the link to the LinkedIn page in the chat of this particular call. Now, let's talk about events. This is incredible. We have already secured an impressive list of upcoming events and are excited about the topics and the experts supporting our program. After only 16 months of network of experts is growing exponentially, demand to cover specific topics is increasing. And we are also adding physical virtual events, meaning hybrid, next month in London, in Berlin, and in Munich. And we just hosted 25 German SMB CEOs here in Silicon Valley, and we will host another 25 CEOs within the next hour here at Intel's headquarters in Silicon Valley. I personally will be attending the London, Berlin, and Munich events, but feel free not only to stop by personally if you are around, but also please dial in virtually as it is a hybrid event. In preparation for today's hot topic, we acknowledge that the 2 topics, Web 3.0 and Metaverse, are somewhat connected, but are so rich in content and have relevance within their own domain. And for that reason, we decided to add 2 additional individual sessions for a much more deeper dive with very senior industry experts towards the end of the year. If anyone has transatlantic or AI-related topics of any sort, please reach out to us and we will consider building them into the program. Now, we are excited to announce yet another experienced panel of experts to discuss the future of business in Web3 and Metaverse, growth Nirvana, or pipe dream. So let's get to it. I would like to introduce today's speaker, starting with Olaf Groth, a longtime friend who suggested actually the topic a few months ago, and maybe a few words about yourself, please. In that regards, Olaf, please go ahead and let me stop sharing my screen, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thomas, as you know, we've been around each other and we've been friends for the better part of 25 years. And I think you've started a fantastic thing with Transatlantic AI Exchange, and I'm very glad to be part of it. So my gratitude to you. And I also want to communicate my excitement to be with our speakers here, Arun, Edo, and Tommaso, in exploring these new growth horizons. So with that said, in terms of my background, I think you see it here on the left. I am a professor at UC Berkeley Haas and Hult International Business School, and I run a small two-headed company called Cambrian Futures and Cambrian Designs. We craft strategy and concept designs for the cognitive economy, and I'll say more about what exactly that is. To the right of me here, you will see Tobias Straube, who's my sidekick. I'd like to acknowledge him here. He couldn't be with us today, but he is my partner in crime, as it were, for all matters research, especially in Web3 and the Metaverse. So thank you, Tobias, in your absence. The reason for why I was so excited, Thomas, I'm going to launch right in here. The reason for why I was so excited to be invited by you to this event is that it really plays on two of the books that we've been writing. One is Solomon's Code about global AI trends, and then the other one is The Great Remobilization, which is describing the cognitive economy that I've mentioned now once or twice. That's forthcoming in 2023. Really, Metaverse as well as Web3 are new ways of harnessing the power of artificial intelligence. Let me explain. So for this new book, The Great Remobilization, we have been examining what we call tectonic shifts, major disruptions in the global economy, especially as they fall into what we call the 6 C's that are shaping the new operating system of the new global economy. The first one is cognitive tech, right? And that's right in there, you and Tykes with artificial intelligence and other cognitive technologies such as brain-computer interfaces, modern sensing technology, brain-computer interfaces, modern AI-supported genomics, etc. Then there is COVID-19, less so the virus itself, and more so the data science and the AI technologies that flow from it. Crypto, blockchain, Web3 as one complex, right? And that's really sort of what we're picking on here today. Then there is a reformulation of cybersecurity, and then, of course, climate change and the potential that cognitive technology has in mitigating that. And least but not least, you can't really do anything in the global cognitive economy going forward without co-thinking China as well, as it is emerging to be a co-leader in the cognitive economy. So what I'd like to do is unpack the cognitive economy with the focus on this 1C, which is crypto and Web3, of course, supported by cognitive technology. So when we say cognitive economy, what exactly do we mean here? So when we use cognification, that's really the 2030 term as the evolution of digitization. Digitization created data, right? It created infrastructure, but it's really a 2010 term. What all of us here on this call ought to concern ourselves with is 2022 forward into the 2030s, and that's really cognification. And cognification means the injection of cybernetic type control and reconnaissance technologies that are helping us manage the different systems, whether they're economic, ecological, infrastructural, even biological. Why does that matter? That matters because it means that we are now infusing our modern digital platforms, whether centralized or decentralized, with stakeholder interests and negotiations, right? We cannot run away from that anymore. We have been infusing societies and economies with cognitive tech. So now these interests are coming back to us and saying, hey, you know what, certain things aren't working. We have a better way, right? So let me talk about that then. We started hearing about Web3 when crypto broke loose, right? Most of all, Bitcoin. And it's startling. Bitcoin got to a valuation of $1 trillion faster than any of these four hyperscaler platforms that we see here. And of course, you could rightly say, well, it's overhyped, it's overheated, right? In reality, of course, it's trading very risky tech stocks. But you might be right that it's a bubble, right? And the bubble is growing in a lot of markets that are having institutional problems, right? And that is including the United States, but also crypto headquarters in Ukraine, Web3 headquarters, I should say, because crypto really through blockchain is driving Web3 applications, especially in the areas of decentralized finance. So what you see here is the darker areas like India, like parts of Africa, parts of Latin America. Of course, you could argue, well, some of these have institutional trouble, and that's why people aren't really trusting established high-tech firms, and we need to get much better at addressing their concerns, right? But really, all of this is missing the larger point. We are now with Web3, where we were in 2000 or in 1998 with the internet. We are laying the foundations for a new internet. And that's oftentimes what people are missing when they talk about the erosion of trust, of course. Yes, the erosion of trust is real in the internet, but that is because business, largely the global hyperscaler platforms, while reasonably, assessed to be reasonably competent, are also distrusted. Why is that the case? Well, every time, of course, we believe that we're creating something more base democratic, more diffused, we're seeing that large corporations are drawing these innovation instincts toward themselves. So you can see here community-based sharing of AI code, for instance, Kaggle, GitHub, Wise, all acquired by global hyperscaler platforms, right? So then what do we do about this? If this is not the vision of the internet that we thought we were going to have, right, which started with Web 1, pretty much dominated by large telecom companies, then by large hyperscaler platforms becoming Web 2, now segueing into a more decentralized world where really we are changing platforms into protocols, right? We're saying protocols, not platform, and protocols that are governed in a much more democratized, more decentralized way. How does that articulate itself? Well, there's various artifacts that are really important. Crypto was just the beginning, right? Crypto, nobody should get hung up on crypto. Crypto is big, crypto is material. It's the pushing force, like I said, behind Web3. But beyond that, we're seeing maybe even more interesting things like NFTs, of course, as a reframing of intellectual property, making it much more portable, much more tradable. Decentralized finance, I mentioned already, speaks for itself. Decentralized apps coming, and then decentralized autonomous organizations. We are now seeing a lot of stakeholders getting together in these virtual organizations held together by mechanisms like quad voting, right, in order to assure that no one party can gain dominant control over a certain chain as a new organizational mechanism leading to a distribution of ownership around the digital economy. This goes as far as to say we might be seeing the emergence of new decentralized trading platforms. Web3 is enabling blockchain-based data trading. We're seeing the first couple of applications there. So this idea that the global hyperscaler platforms own our data will, of course, remain the case for the coming decade or beyond, but it'll be counterbalanced by new trading paradigms that acknowledge that data is owned by the people who create it. And so we are really looking at more of a revolution, a rebalancing, as it were, of data and creation ownership. This is a typical sort of platform canvas, right? This is Web 2. Any of the big hyperscaler platforms will find themselves in this. Multiple sides. In the middle, you have centralized compute power because only they have the deep pockets to develop the most advanced chips at scale. Okay, and of course to attract big talent of $1 million or more every year, right? Now we're seeing this being essentially flipped on its head, where people are saying, you know what, I'm going to split the application layer from the development and compute power and governance layer. I want to democratize the ownership of compute power and of development, right? So what does that mean? That means that for every one of the hyperscaler platforms now, we are seeing emerging Web3 protocols to try to rebalance those weights. We will no doubt see a shakeout here. This is not going to be Web3 replacing Web 2, but again, rather a rebalancing. A lot of these Web3 platforms in these areas from, co-working spaces to search, to music, to social media, of course, will go belly up, as we have seen in the internet as well. Remember, this could be a fairly normal cycle of expansion and combustion. Let me lead over to Web3 and just say, as I close out, that Web3 is one key application space for Web3. And in Metaverse 2, we will be seeing a split between Web3 type applications and Web 2, right? So there will be hyperscaler platforms that will, as they have already with Facebook and everybody else, will put out new immersive type productivity and socialization and entertainment spaces. And then there will be Web3 protocol-based solutions that will try to diffuse the ownership of that. For a while, we'll see this toggling, this rebalancing back and forth. So we'll see centrally owned structures, next to community governed structures. We'll see centralized data storage with decentralized, right? When I'm thinking of Intel, I'm thinking about, clearly the cloud business is huge. It's going to stay. It's probably going to become ever juicier. But companies like this also need to think about, how will I address decentralized compute power, maybe via edge computing, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, payments infrastructures will change as well, from traditional structures to crypto wallets. Similarly, identity will become more diffused. Rather than it being, one platform determining what your identity is, verifying that, authenticating that, you may now have the tools to actually determine what your identity is by platform, and maybe port that identity over to other platforms, as unwieldy as that challenge is at the moment. And then finally, revenue, right? And that's the big question for all of us that are entrepreneurs. How do you actually now distribute that revenue? Previously, data, compute power, talent was owned by big multi-sided platforms. Now we are actually seeing that creator economy wanting to be reimbursed, wanting to make money in a much more diffuse peer-to-peer fashion through Web3 underlying the metaverse. So again, those two trends, side by side, at times clashing, which one will win out, which one will be dominant? That's the battle of the next 10 years. Okay, so with that said, Thomas, thank you very much for letting me lead us into this, and back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Olaf. Appreciate that. If you could stop share. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. So before I go over to Tommaso, I want to just share a quick slide that in preparation to this session actually caught my attention. And it's the McKinsey report from just recently, June 2022, and it's called The Value Creation in the Metaverse. And it's a really interesting visualization of what they call the layers that is made of within the metaverse. And they are claiming that the metaverse today is up to 10 layers. And I just want to give a very quick intro. The first one is in regards to payments and monetization. There needs to be platform and tools that needs to be implemented and or developed, which I would assume will also create opportunities for startup companies and established corporations to actually build these new businesses or connect the dots. So there are opportunities, plenty of them in front of us. There's identity issues that needs to be managed, as well as the security, privacy, and governance issues, from regulations to the platforms to put it all together. So all of this, when I see this, I think of startup opportunities in any creative way. The second one is the infrastructure and the hardware. For example, that's where I would see, at least to some extent, the core business of Intel with the devices and the edge, the hardware, the components, the underlying infrastructure, the cloud, the semiconductor, things like that. Obviously, opportunities there as well. Then there is the access and the discovery of the content itself. So all of this is platform driven. There are the creators. Somebody needs to create the content and create and provide the development platform. Could be as a SaaS service, could be in libraries and middleware, whatever it may be. And then lastly, there's the content and the experience itself for the target audience, which could be not just business to business, but also consumers. And I would definitely say that the metaverse is just not all about gaming or virtual reality as we know it. There's obviously much, much more to it. And with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing, and I would like to give it over to Tommaso, who has a lot to say about the metaverse. I would like to start by thanking him personally. He allowed me to take over the last few months his online class at Berkeley about the metaverse. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I learned a few things that I completely was not aware of. So I would highly recommend for anybody who wants to dive deeper to have a look at that really interactive, cool created class that he created. With that, I would like to give it over to Tommaso.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Olaf, thanks for the setup. And Arun and Ido, so great to meet you virtually. Yvonne, thanks for setting it up. And greetings all around the world. Let me share here a couple of slides too, just to give a sense here. If you guys provide me a thumbs up, then I'm in the know that you're seeing the slide. Thanks for the introduction. Real quick, short introduction about myself, and then maybe one or two sentences about the course that Thomas was referring to. I live in the Bay Area. As you can see on my family name here, my name. I'm originally from Italy, lived in Germany for almost 20 years. I went for a year through London, and for the last 12 years here in the Bay Area. The reason why I moved to the Bay Area is because I was seeking like-minded people that wanted to leave the world a better place, and that's what satisfies me here. As an entrepreneur, I did 4 startups, started in '98 in tech, my first startup in 2001. I had the 2 exit in those startups. I'm a 2-times author. The most recent book called Navigating the Metaverse, published by Wiley this May. You see here a couple of familiar names for those who read the topics about the metaverse. Kathy Hackel, Dirk Luth, my 2 co-authors in the book itself. I am a UC Berkeley faculty, a lecture entrepreneurship with a focus on Web3 and the metaverse. And last but not least, we have a fund investing in startups, early stage startups in the space of the metaverse, right? Thomas, thanks again. I'm glad that the course provided some value. I was asked to take actually the learnings, the lessons learned, which I'm still collecting every single day, but I like to say what I learned, I like to share, right? We created a metaverse course, a course for non-technical professionals who seek to unlock Web3 business opportunity. It's called Alma Meta, and you can find it on Alma Meta XYZ. Please take a look at that. I just here real quick, if you go on the website, you will see the syllabus. The syllabus goes from the evolution, how we got actually from Web 1 to Web 3, right? Chapter number 2 is the behavioral shift, because this is not a technology advancement, but it's really a shift on the human behavior, the way that we interact with Web3. Then the number 3 is recalibrating learnings. What you will be finding there is, what is it that we need to unlearn that we learned in Web 2 or maybe in Web 1 in order for us to be successful and deploy successful strategies into the metaverse realm. We have a risk assessment also backed by a metaverse Canva. So you will be assessing what kind of assets, what kind of categories you would need to break down before you make your choice for potential metaverse and metaverse platforms, right? Then you have a business opportunity, use cases, and the metaverse canvas I was referring to. Last but not least, feel free to scan this code. I will be providing one access for free. It will be announced at roughly 10:50 PST, so in 25 minutes. And I'll be sharing also the code here, the link to this free access as soon as we have the winner in the group. Thank you so much.
Great, Tommaso, thank you very much. And more to questions later. Now the quick question, Arun, are you there? Do you have power?
Hey, Thomas, I'm here. I don't have power, but I hope I'm coming through okay.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Okay, let me see if my video works. If for some reason I start stuttering, I'll go off video as well. Sorry about this.
I have to laugh because here we are talking about Web 3.0, blockchains and Metaverse, and we are living in Northern California and we have rolling blackouts. I mean, how does that fit together?
Exactly. And I guess this is opportune because this blends the physical versus the digital, and it has a nice mix of that as well. So we can actually talk about that in the Q&A as well. But just a little bit of introductions for myself. I lead the cloud and AI strategy and execution team at Intel. But just before this, I was leading the what I would call extreme scale computing teams at Amazon. And really, what does extreme scale computing mean? It's really a combination of large scale physics-based simulations and large scale AI all put together with infrastructure that can actually support what I would call planetary scale computing. And to what Olaf and Tommaso mentioned, both from a Web3 context and how Metaverse can actually become a reality, it's I just view that as a natural confluence of a combination of both of those technologies coming together. And just a little bit about my background. I'm an aerospace engineer with training, spent about, I would say, half my career building very large scale models. So think of an entire jet engine or an entire gas turbine, or modeling the energy network of the world, modeling the transportation network of the world, things of that nature. And then the rest of my career has been on building distributed computing platforms for other people to build large-scale models. So think of that as large-scale AI models, or combining AI with physics-based simulations, and how can you actually go make meaningful business outcomes possible through advanced simulations. And in an environment where most of the business outcomes actually get so far away from the cool research techniques, how do you actually bridge the gap between what is in research to what can actually be applied to get business outcomes? So I'm super excited to talk to the rest of the panelists here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thomas, you're muted.
Very good point. Thank you very much. So the next one up is Ido Segal. He is a founder and CEO based in Israel, a company called Touchcast. When I saw the demo that he provided me access to, I was mind-boggled. I think he, with his platform, is light years ahead of many other companies of what he has already put together. I personally was in a virtual reality startup company 6-7 years ago in the sporting Formula E arena. And what he expressed here in his platform is so much better than what I have ever experienced in the past. So with that, I would say firsthand, he's actually in his own metaverse world already introducing himself. Ido, take it from here.
Thank you, Thomas. And what a wonderful opportunity to be with these distinguished speakers. It's really awesome to discuss a topic that is on top of many people's minds and share another perspective. I'm speaking with you from what we refer to as Metaverse as a Service, which is, I think, a real kind of pivot point in where we are relative to the compute continuum, that we've always had this kind of shift between client and server. I think SaaS was a reflection of moving to the server as we run things on the server. And we really believe that this approach fundamentally will allow us to remove the weakest links to creating these incredible metaversal experiences like the one you're experiencing now, where I'm effectively like my colleagues sitting at home, but you're seeing me in this ray-traced metaverse experience, hyper real, with my video, not an avatar. And this really opens up a path. I dropped out of college in 1993 to start a virtual reality company. Was a bit too early. Have had a string of successes in terms of companies that I sold, 3 of them, many other failures as well, which I celebrate, and have been involved in a lot of really core tech work on all levels of the stack. So actually the partnership with Intel is a really inspiring one for us at TouchCast, for me personally. TouchCast is over 200 people in 16 countries, working with some of the world's biggest companies like Intel, Microsoft, Accenture, and others. So I think I'm looking forward to the conversation, and maybe just a few words on the point of view, because we don't have that much time. I think that we should view the metaverse as an evolution of our communication technology stack. So if you think of what happened through COVID, we kind of moved everything onto these video calls, which we wouldn't have believed was possible. And I would urge people to think of the metaverse as an extension of that, of a way that people communicate. And it's also like the point that was made earlier, like 1998, we had this opportunity in 98 to start moving our paper collateral from books into the digital realm. And that created this whole incredible growth in economy, which was the e-commerce revolution. But we really just grafted those paper catalogs, and now we have this opportunity to really graft the rest of the world into this digital fabric with everything that comes with digital. So 1977, I was trying to convince my parents to buy me this bike, and 40 plus years later, this is how we're buying bikes, which is kind of pathetic given the we've managed to do a lot of things in that time. So we now have this opportunity to really graft the physical world, and so many implications to that. And bringing that to end users in a decentralized fashion is really the way I believe it will happen, as opposed to just having a few big data centers managed by these leading tech companies. So just a quick introduction, looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Ido, thank you very much. And you actually, I have the first question, because you just reminded me with a picture of the catalog. I did not even think about the old catalogs days anymore. I remember in Germany, when you buy some stuff, you have these thick catalogs that come twice a year to your doorstep. We have the yellow pages with a telephone. But let me start on that note, what you just shared. Around 7 years ago, I joined a virtual reality startup company to bring immersive experience of live sporting events into virtual reality. It wasn't called Metaverse at the time. And then from there, I ended up with Intel, starting to sell, or trying to sell, 6 degree of freedom inside out technology to the headset manufacturers. Oculus just started, Google, Samsung, and so on and so on. I do remember the enormous potential revenue numbers and unit numbers that was thrown at us from IDC and Gartner. VR is growing exponentially, AR is growing, and here we are 7-8 years later, and I have to say, it didn't happen. It didn't happen the way it was forecasted. And one of my questions to all of you is the current hype based on the emergence of now finally certain technologies are coming together and make it happen? Or is it simply because, and this could be a hype, only because somebody like Facebook changed their name to Meta, that all of a sudden the whole world is around this term Meta and Metaverse? Anybody wants to start?
I'm happy to give it a go, Thomas, to kick us off, and I'll keep it brief. But I think the key question here is it's clearly an overhyped term, right? Oftentimes we don't even know how to define it really, and that goes for both Web3 and Meta as well, but more so for Meta. I think though, when you study sort of the Gartner hype cycle, you'll see that the initial hype is almost necessary in order for people to be forced to be more disciplined about what it really is. So as we go up the hype cycle and we come down into what's called sort of the trough of disillusionment, right? Which is when the VCs say, I'm going to stop funding these ventures because nobody is buying the stuff. That's when savvy entrepreneurs pick it up and swing it out. the trough of enlightenment, right? And say, look, I'm going to slice off vertical applications and use cases and make a good, profitable, maybe slightly smaller, but profitable business out of those spaces. And I think we need to look at these use cases to really figure out, where is the value that we can create, right? And I guess in Meta, it's enriching customer and communication experiences, like Edo was saying, right? Like in customer care or in sales, or even in places like education or healthcare, right? That's one key. That's one key to do, I think.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I would just add that it's not that Facebook changed their name to Meta. That really contributed to it, and in terms of maybe the consumer mindset. But Facebook is investing $10 billion. So when one tech company invests $10 billion in an arms race, you can assume that you're looking at between $20 to $30 billion going into opportunity. So when humanity points its creativity and its resources towards something, there will be some movement. And that's really the way to think about the Meta name change. It's not just the fact that they changed the name and now everybody's talking about the metaverse. It's the tremendous amount of resources. And if you want to look at a cautionary tale, just look at consumer electronics, 3D televisions, and how many billions of dollars went into that, and that also went nowhere. So I am a strong believer that this evolution of our communication path, because I live it every day, it's such an empowering technology, is going to happen. But I also do not believe that it will happen because people will wear computers on their noses. It's just not the way it's going to manifest, in my view, and I don't think it needs to.
I think one point I'd add is like hype cycle is on one side, but then really getting through to the illusion, or getting past the illusion, really is value creation, right? So ultimately, there have to be savvy entrepreneurs that get into the mix and actually create value, and then extract value from the value that they've created. Right, and so that's really where we would like to march, and hopefully that this cycle is much shorter rather than going through a much longer evolution phase, right? And you can argue that even AI hasn't quite crossed into that range yet. You do hear a lot about where AI is making a difference, but if you ask the average enterprise, have they really reaped all the benefits of the investments they've made? Not quite.
I echo what my colleagues say, and to add to that, right, we are definitely in an early adoption phase, right? Like any other cycle of innovation that we have seen in the past, right? The clouds, the mobile phones, right? And an early adopters is really focusing on targeting a specific target audience, right? Right now, maybe there might be a couple of misconceptions out there. What is actually this thing called the metaverse, or who is self-coining themselves to be a metaverse, right? At the end of the day, we're seeing a bunch of games that are blockchain based, that create immersive experiences that you can equally own or co-create, right? That's definitely has elements of decentralization and metaverse approach, but is this what the metaverse is going to be? The metaverse, in my point of view, definitely is not a trend. The metaverse is here to stay, and it is the evolution of the limits that we are facing with Web 2. When I say Web 2, let's take a couple of big buckets in Web 2, like social media, online advertisement, loyalty program. They have reached its capabilities to be fun, capability to be rewarded, right? And now for that, we need a new set of feature, new set of technology, which the blockchain allows us to support, right, with the infrastructure and the underlying infrastructure. And let's not forget, right, that it's an evolution of needs that humankind has, right? Over the last years, we have been asking for more traceability, for more data transparency. We have been asking to have a voice in what we do and wherever we contribute, to own our data, right? And now slowly but surely, we are all doing this together, right?
Good feedback. Thank you. So looking at the metaverse right now, who are already the early adopters to use the metaverse? And obviously there's this term digital twin, but who are the early adopters commercially speaking, but also on the consumer side? To give people some ideas where this is heading, where it is today, actually. Ido, maybe you want to start because you have this phenomenal platform.
Sure. I, having lived through the first bubble, if you will, in '99, and seeing us go from a world where people were skeptical about people using their credit cards online. And for some people on this call, that might sound like a bizarre idea, or that people will buy more than books online. And that's where it's going to end. We really, being in the trenches, I really feel it's like that moment. It's like that moment where Bezos jumped into his car and drove all the way to Seattle and started Amazon. There is so much opportunity. It's bursting with opportunity. There are so many, this buffet that this technology offers, and it's a function of the maturity of the entire stack, the type of work that Intel and NVIDIA and the cloud providers, everyone's doing, has gotten us to a point where there's sufficient technology horsepower to deliver on just a abundance of use cases. And for me as a CEO of a startup in this environment, it's dizzying, because it's more like you need to think of what to say no to, because there's just so many opportunities. Once you start understanding that this is just effectively the next thing after video conferencing, which is just a gross simplification, but it does help us as kind of a species understand the significance given what we just endured during COVID. So I think there's a lot of early adaptation that we're seeing. We're working with, as I mentioned earlier, some of the world's major companies to move a lot of use cases into this environment. So you can imagine a world in which people can buy a laptop, for example, Microsoft, you see on the screen now, inside a digital twin of a Microsoft store. Microsoft has exited retail. They are no longer in stores. But this is a digital twin.
Hi, welcome. My name is Matt. I'll be assisting you today. Is it Dory I'm speaking with?
Hi,
Matt. Yes, it's Dory.
He doesn't have to live in
Hi, Dory. Lovely to meet you. Where are you joining us from today, Dory?
Calling in from Dallas, Texas.
Texas. I've never been to Texas, but I'd love to go. Although I hope it's when your weather's kind of at the better end. I think it's been a bit up and down lately, hasn't it?
Yes, typical Texas weather, up and down, but right now it's pretty nice.
And that's just one.
Oh, well, fingers crossed it stays that way. I can see that you've expressed interest in Surface Pro 8. Is that correct?
We see this in
Yes,
training
that is
and
correct.
simulations.
Okay. And is this going to be the first Surface product, or have you got another one that you're maybe using at the moment?
There is a lot
Actually,
of
right now I'm
evidence that
using
that's a really
Surface
great
3,
use
and
case
it's just
for VR.
time for a general
But when they
upgrade.
actually try to embrace
Okay,
VR,
what makes you say that, if you don't mind me
get
asking?
into this brick wall.
It's been a little
Peter,
sluggish,
sorry to
and
interrupt, but you're getting drowned out. We're getting two audios.
Okay, so I used to use a Surface 3, so I know that the storage options, they had a couple of different ones, I think. Do you mind if I ask which one you opted for when you bought your Surface 3?
Sure, I currently have the 64 gig.
Okay, 64. So 64 gig of storage, and it's feeling a little bit sluggish, so we're looking for an upgrade. Well, first of all, I can tell you that in terms of storage,
can you stop sharing for a second?
Available before, so 64 gig used to.
Here we go. Are you there?
I am, just a sec.
Okay, perfect. Now I think we got the picture. Beautiful virtual reality store. I think everybody got an idea where this is heading, particularly with the quality and the interactivity. It was just that your voice was in the background. You could barely hear it because the person from Texas, virtually speaking, took over in the virtual world. But we got the picture. Very
really
good
wants to hit his numbers and get his commission. That's why.
So on that note, so you just showing us here kind of a conference room kind of a thing, and you have the Intel logo somewhere, but then you also have the Microsoft store. Do you see more opportunities within the commercial space initially, or in the consumer space? B2B
Right now,
or B2C?
Yeah, a lot of the traction we're seeing is servicing companies that are looking for relationships with their customers, direct relationships. Similar to when you look at e-commerce and then you have that little chat bubble on the bottom right, what's the equivalent of that in the metaverse is kind of what I just shared with you, this idea of a human connection, which is making these companies think differently about the human capital that they have, their employees, and how they connect to their customers in a way that's very human, not translated through an avatar, but rather informed by product. And also then bringing that into the physical world. So it doesn't end with just the digital world. Once you have these digital twins, you can bring them back into the physical environment in many ways.
Yeah. Now, maybe a direct question I have for Arun. Looking at from an Intel perspective, right? We are in the semiconductor business. We are in the cloud service business. We are on the edge. We are, in end devices. What is your lens that you are looking through right now to define your strategy as much as you can share? And how does it relate and enable, and what needs to be enabled for the customers actually to adopt this? What's missing?
So I would say a couple of things, right? So, but before we go into what is even missing, right? So I'd like to echo what Tommaso said, that Metaverse is here to stay. And one of the early indications for that is, of course, what Ido showed you in terms of in the commercial space. But even more earlier indication is looking at industries which have traditionally had a hard time moving on. These are the industries who would still want a dial tone phone when the world has moved on to the mobile industry. And those industries are actually going headfirst into actually doing applications in the metaverse. I'll give you some examples, right? So where you're looking at, say, the manufacturing industry, and they've traditionally struggled with upskilling their labor force. And in many industries, they're going through a massive next 5-year time frame where they're going to see significant retirements in their workforce. And the next generation of workforce just isn't there for various reasons. And they're trying to upskill that labor very quickly. And one of the things that they're going towards is how do you enable that in the digital world, not in a Web2 way, but actually in the metaverse. And you can see that in manufacturing and energy and oil and gas. A lot of these industries are traditionally pretty slow in uptick. So that's one area. But then the area of where you see gaps really is today to deliver any of these kinds of experiences, like what Ido is delivering, or even what happens in the rest of the metaverse, you do need what I would call cloud-based rendering or rendering at scale that would actually be at a cost point that can be low enough so that you can democratize it. The same way we are enjoying these videos and having the cost point to barrier to entry low, having an environment where you can interact in a 3D way is fairly expensive today. And from an Intel perspective, actually, in terms of democratizing access to people, both from a graphics perspective and also from an AI perspective, like imagine a 3D world that is created by a Nerf model. That's an extremely expensive model to go deliver today. But then we can actually do that at a cost point that can go democratize it for the masses. And you need to do that at a scale that can actually enable the ecosystem. Otherwise, it just becomes a niche, like say, player space, which is only available to a few players.
Got it.
Allow me to add, Thomas, here maybe a consumer angle, right? And look back, let's say 18 months, right? So in the year 2000, we had roughly $1 billion in transactions done via those unique digital assets that are better known as non-fungible tokens, abbreviated with NFTs, right? And the year after, in 2021, this went roughly 20x, right? But still we had something new, a new phenomenon that people were curious and going through these hurdles and the challenges of making it work with the underlying infrastructure of blockchain, transferring the money, transferring the funds, right? And having this blockchain usability experience. So you asked previously also, who is the early adopter? From a consumer perspective, let's say in 2021, we've seen a couple of headlines, right? Such as, the Sandbox, Decentraland, Sonia Space, right? That have created those immersive worlds where people meet in real life with the mission to experience an event, right? They have a purposeful events. We have been seeing that especially industries such as sports, music, and entertainment have been experimenting in there, right? Obviously, the question is how successful and how do you define success in an early adopter? Am I seeing a heart? Yeah, am I seeing a heart? Yeah. In an early adopter space, right? But you see that definitely we have brands also in fashion and the brands also in the finance industry right now acquiring land with the mission of building experiences and creating those immersive events where people can co-create potentially or own equally what they have co-create. That's kind of what I would define as of today, right? What we have today in this early adoption phase. I like also to reverse engineer and have a future back perspective, maybe 5 or 10 years down the road. I know it's in the metaverse, is insane to talk about the time, right? But I believe the metaverse will be at the peak of its acceptance as soon as we will be having a seamless integration in our real life. I believe that we live in the metaverse and we don't play in the metaverse. A metaverse is all around us. I like to call it phygital. It's the convergence between of this physical world we live in which we paint a data layer on top of it, I believe a lot there in the augmentation, because it's very, very seamless in terms of the way that you could deploy this use case. So augmentation on top of places, of people, of products, right? That provide you then access into a new dimension, a cross-dimensional experience, right? So seamless integration, cross-dimensional experience.
I want to layer into that, Tomas, if I can, and build on what Tomas was saying, right? So I think he's right in pointing out one key issue, and that is, how open will the metaverse be? Is this going to be essentially a multiverse of different big platforms, hyperscaler platforms, essentially for big brands to self-actuate and reach the consumer in more immersive ways, which is what Edo has shown very nicely here? Or is this going to be an open public square where people can actually build that town square, and the big department stores, as it were, or the big car brands or whoever can be part of that, but it's owned by the public, right? That's number one. And the second one is really, who is going to benefit from this? We keep saying the creator economy, right? But the creator economy is only going to work if we can actually create enough scale for them. And that's what sort of Tommaso is hinting at here, right? Which is, how long is this integration going to take? I mean, today, when you talk to somebody from Microsoft integrating into a metaverse type environment from Apple, integrating into a metaverse environment from BMW, they're like, it's impossible. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how you can take your avatar from Microsoft to BMW, and to do that 5,000 times over, the amount of integration work that is happening there is really, really tedious and will take a long time. So I think we need to look for the players who can drive that integration, because otherwise, how is it going to scale, right? And I think that's the other critical problem here for revenue generation.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Now let me ask a question to Ido, because I think our web setup is that only the speaker will be displayed. So as we are all the speakers, we see each other, but the audience does not. But I want to ask specifically Ido, because I want Ido to actually show the beating heart that he's showing us the whole time here, because it's really cool and it opens your mind of what is possible in the future if you want to have a virtual, almost real-time or real life visit to your doctor. So the question is, for me at least, if you look at the metaverse, and then there is the term Web3, and at the beginning I said they are kind of connected, but they're also so rich and somewhat, individually important, but also independent. So my question is to the whole audience here, what is really the difference fundamentally between metaverse and Web3 for the people who are not that familiar with the terms in itself? Because when I talk to regular people who are not in depth in this space, metaverse for them is like running around with a headset on and go into virtual reality, primarily gaming. And Web3, it's even more mysterious. And the only thing that people associate with that is blockchain, where they don't know what it is, and cryptocurrencies, which has a bad reputation. That's the high level view within the audience. So for everybody here, starting with Ido, and please show your heart, how would you explain the difference between metaverse and Web3, and how it's connected and or not connected?
Well, let me first say that I'm actually, my hobby is being a cardiologist, as you can see here, when I'm not trying to sell cars. And I think it's, there's a pretty stark definition, and I think for my part is that Web3 is about decentralization and leveraging a new stack of technologies to create experiences, digital experiences that connect humanity. And it's foundational in its departure from the way things are done now. And the reality is that when people used Web 2 or Web 1, they didn't necessarily understand the underlying technology, and they didn't need to, right? So it's not the case that everybody necessarily needs to understand why the stack is fundamentally different. So they will care more about the attributes that what does it change for them? And what it changes for them is a response to what we've experienced. And it's a pendulum swing again of the abuses of Facebook with data, et cetera, to a point where people want to control their information, to have more privacy. And that's what decentralization offers. And that, of course, is a double-edged sword, because it also is probably the most incredible petri dish for bad actors. And that's why it's so, I think, challenging for anyone with a moral compass. When you think about both the promise and the peril, and it is a very challenging world ahead of us, of how, and any technology could be used for really good things and really, really bad things. And it just is a reflection of humanity. So I think that's a broader conversation that's going to evolve. But what you're going to see is this movement into decentralization, this movement into people having access to cryptocurrencies as a mode of empowerment, and not just as coins, but as utility tokens that drive this decentralization. Today, there's a very small handful of ways in which people can enrich themselves or add value by virtue of contributing by mining. But in the future, there'll be many ways that you can create a utility token that reflects your contribution. And it's going to be looked at through different lenses. If it's China, to Olaf's point, they're going to use it in a very specific way to arrive at a very specific objective function of control. And if it's going to be used by a bad actor, it'll be another way. And if it's used by Intel, it'll be a different way. So it is literally just like the World Wide Web and everything that spawned out of it. We couldn't have imagined it back in when it started, and look where we are today. And that was just like the first iPod. Think of the first iPod with the rotary dial and the iPhone. And that's kind of the way to think about Web 1 and this coming Web 3 and Metaverse. There's so much that's going to happen. And it's accelerating. It's moving faster than it moved from 99, in my view.
Anybody else wants to take it?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think Edo has it right. It's about ownership. Web3, the original kernel of the idea, is about this is community owned. This is not a large corporation. This is not a large hyperscaler. They can be part of that construct of, let's say, a DAO, for instance, but it should not be run by big corporations. It should be run and owned by the community. And of course, that presents scaling challenges, right? How do you amass the kind of compute power and talent and capital to build what the hyperscaler platforms have built across a community of vast differences and diversity, right? And there, I think tokenomics, as well as things like quad voting governance, will come in handy. But it's not going to completely overtake or revolutionize Web 2. It's going to be counterbalance.
Yeah.
To that point, there's also a co-dependence on today's technology for Web3 to actually grow, right? That is the irony in a lot of the Web3 platforms today is most of them run on some centralized platform or the other, right? But then the consumption model actually is what is decentralized. And eventually, hopefully, the hope is that even the distribution model will also be decentralized.
So maybe closing quickly, everybody has like one comment to make on the following question. I assume we have a lot of entrepreneurs and startups on this call. And whatever the hype cycle is, I think the takeaway of this session is definitely there was a hype, there were the early adopter phases. We are still in there, but we are getting out of it. This is getting serious business and it's here to stay. That seems to be a very clear message from the session today. And we will have deeper dives later in the year. If you are a startup person today and you look at the value creation and there is opportunities out there and problems that needs to be solved, one advice could any of you give to an entrepreneurial minded person of what opportunities to look for and build a startup company and nurture it? Any suggestions?
Well, let me go first. I think regardless of Web 1, Web 2, or Web 3, the beauty of entrepreneurship has not changed, which is we are still solving a problem for humankind. So the better you understand a very specific problem, the higher the probability that you will be getting traction, and traction leads to experience. So that's my 2 cents. I think we should disregard the fact of that it's called Web3, but we should focus on what are the changes, the behavioral changes that we are seeing as signals, right? And what can we then develop on top of that? What problem can we solve on top of that, right? Definitely the reinvention of the general term of the reinvention maybe of the term experience in a broader sense is what I would would suggest to any entrepreneur to dissect, right? Speaking of the heart, oh, now we have here beautiful Ferraris, right? So dissect experience. So experience is immersiveness. Through immersiveness, we activate all senses. What industries needs a dissection that activates our senses, right? Co-creation did not exist in Web 2 at all. How can you equally co-create something, right? And at the center of all this, how can you empower a community rather than a follower mentality, right? Follower no more, follower was Web 2, communities Web 3. Yeah, these are my 2 senses.
So with that, I have to admit we are out of time. However, I want to thank everybody for their time, their knowledge, their wisdom, and spending the time with us today. As I mentioned earlier, there is going to be other deeper dive session that we will have by the end of the year, so in a few months. And with that, thank you very much. I hope everybody will have a great day, great week, and this session will be recorded and will be available AI-enabled for free on our website in the coming weeks. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. I'll meet you in the metaverse.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.